Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean. Today I'm going to show you another sick mod you can do on your Harbor Freight 20-ton press. And the modification is I want to install a winch to where I can raise and lower this press bed just on my own. I don't need another helper to be on one handle while I'm on the opposing handle and we're lowering it and raising it together. With this winch mod, I can do it all by myself if I'm in a situation where I'm doing some axle work and I don't have a person available to help me. So with that said, let me show you the parts I got for this job. I purchased this half-ton winch from Harbor Freight. This is the handle for it. I purchased a couple of pulleys from Amazon, and then I got a metal ring from a local hardware store. The other thing you'll need is some steel so you can weld it in place and have a mounting point for these pulleys on top of the press. So that's pretty much it, other than some bolts and nuts and washers that I purchased from my local hardware store. All right, you've seen all the parts I'm going to use for this job, and as we go, you'll be able to see all the tools I used to accomplish it. Let's get started. For this modification, I've seen most people mounting it up here. They weld a plate on the top and they mount it right here. But with that kind of mounting location, they have to have a cable going this way as well as down this way. And this winch is set up for just having one cable. So if you're going to do it that way, you have to figure out another area in the spool to mount another cable and get the measurements right on both sides. So when you operate the crank, the press bed goes up equally. So I decided I wanted to do it a different way. I did watch one video of a guy who attached a winch to one of the handles on the press bed. So my idea is I'm gonna mount it in this fashion to the handle on the bed. It would seem logical to put the winch on this way, but because of how the press bed sticks out a little bit, it would interfere with the turning of the crank. So my idea is to drill a couple holes in the end of the handle, do a couple matching holes on the side plate of the winch, and I'm going to mount it like this. And then the cable is going to go upward. It's going to hit the first pulley, and then it's going to go across the top, hit the second pulley, and then it's going to come down from the second pulley down here. I'm going to weld this ring to the other handle, and then the carabiner of the winch is going to clip in here. And so that's the plan, and we'll see how it works. So I got the winch onto the handle, and I took a level on this side to make sure it looked pretty square. And then I made some marks, and I decided I'm going to drill 2 holes a little bit off center because that will put the cable pretty close to right dead center of the I-beam. So it has to be a little offset towards this way for the cable to run right up the middle. I've got center on 2 holes I'm going to drill, and they are 1 3/4 inches apart. I also made marks on this for 2 holes that are going to be 1 3/4 inches apart. So I'm going to get my center punch out so I can get a nice clean start with a starter bit, and then I'm going to just graduate up until I can fit my M8 bolts through here. I'm going to use this spring center punch first. And then I think I'm going to give it a few whacks with a center punch in my ball peen hammer. So I've got the holes that I want to drill center punch, and now I'm going to get my drill bit set out and start drilling some holes. And this bit is dull as hell. Okay. Well, I got one pilot hole drilled. These drill bits leave a lot to be desired. I think they're a little bit worn out. Okay, I've got a couple pilot holes, and you get the idea. I'm not going to bore you with all this repetition, but I'm going to keep on stepping up the drill bits till I can get an M8 bolt in there. I stepped it up all the way to a 5/16 drill bit, and the M8 bolt will fit through. Now I gotta drill out the plate on the winch. Okay, I've got the winch secured at my bench vise. I center punched the holes, and now I'm going to start drilling, doing a progression of drill bits till I can get the M8 bolt in. I want the bolts going from the inside out so it doesn't interfere where the cable attaches to this side of the drum. So I'm going to disconnect the drum. It's a 17 millimeter nut and a 16 millimeter bolt. Just gonna slide them in there with a washer underneath the head. And then I'm going to put the drum back. And then I'll just retighten it. Now I'm going to bring this back over to the press and get it affixed to the handle with another flat washer and a nylon lock nut. And my guess, those are a 13 millimeter. I'm going to get a box end wrench and an open end wrench and tighten them up. I was right, they are a 13 millimeter. So I'm gonna use the ratcheting side on the nut and open end on the inside. Okay, those are both nice and tight. I'm gonna go ahead and get the handle on. It's an oblong hole, so you can only get it on one way. And then I'm just gonna put the nylon lock nut on there and secure it. And I'll have to figure out what size that is. It looks like a 19 millimeter fits it well. Okay, that's on there securely. So now I'm going to extend some cable out to get an idea of where I need to mount the pulley so it has a pretty straight interface with the pulley up here. So I'm not the greatest fabricator, and what I'm doing here isn't like building a rocket. I just want it to look halfway decent and function. So by eyeballing straight up and down with the cable, I could drop a plumb bob, but it's gonna spool off of the hub in different spots, so it's not gonna be an exact science. So it looks like if I have the pulley out about 3 inches from the edge of this, that would be perfect. But maybe what I'll do is I'll measure to the center of the drum, to the I-beam, and use that measurement. Yep, that's about 3 inches. So if I have the edge of the pulley 3 inches out from this I-beam, then the cable will get a nice straight pull over the pulley towards the other side. So that's what I'm going to go for. For the pieces of steel that I'm going to weld into place onto the top of the press, I'm going to cut them to a size of 7 3/4 inches long and 3 7/8 inches wide. So with this size plate, I'm going to have about 5 inches of the plate welded to the top and then 2 3/4 inches sticking over the side. And I think that's going to be ample support, like way overkill, because the pulley wheels aren't going to have that much strain on them. They're just going to be lifting the weight of whatever is on top of the press bed, and nothing I'm going to put on there is going to be that heavy. It's not like going to be like 500 pounds. It's just going to be maybe as much as 100 pounds, maybe at most, maybe a little more if I have a bunch of press plates on there, but it's not going to bend this metal. This is 3/16 inch steel. And so having that 2 3/4 inches hanging off the side isn't going to allow the metal to bend. So I think I'm going to be good to go with these size plates. So I'm going to get on my DeWalt angle grinder with a cutting disc, and I'm going to make the cuts. Wear eye protection and ear protection. It gets loud. Okay, I got the first cut made. I'm going to work on the next two. Okay, that was the final cut. Now I'm going to clean up the edges with the grinder disc and then see how everything's fitting. To clean up the edges, I'm going to use my Milwaukee die grinder with the grinder wheel. Okay, and I'm going to go see how well this fits onto the press. The plates fit pretty good. This one has bigger gaps, but I could fill that in with the welding. And so now what I'm going to do is take the plates back over to the workbench, and I'm going to drill the holes to mount the pulleys to the plates. I've got the holes marked for the pulley, and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna center punch them and then do some pilot holes and then slowly graduate up to where I can fit the M8 bolt through. I've got the holes drilled and I put the bolts going from the inside out. And again, they're 13 millimeter. I'm gonna cinch them up with a ratcheting 13 millimeter box end and then an open end. And the open end one just barely fits in there. And here's the pulley on the plate that I'm gonna weld onto the top of the press. This thing looks like a little bit cocked, so I think I have to loosen them up and readjust to get the pulley a little more square with the plate. So I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna drill the holes on the other plate and get the pulley on. I've got the plates marked off where I'm gonna weld it, 5 inches from here back. I'm gonna wanna clean off all the mill scale everywhere I'm gonna be welding. So I'm gonna be welding on this side, and then I'm gonna be welding on this side. So I'm gonna clean it up really nice so I get a good weld. And then I'm gonna do the same on the press. I measured off from this edge 5 inches, and I'm gonna clean all the paint off in this area on both sides. And I'm gonna use a flap disc with my Milwaukee 1/4 inch die grinder to clean up the metal. Okay, I've got both areas of the press where I'm going to be welding cleaned up of the paint. And then I have the plates that I'm going to be welding onto the press cleaned up also. I'm going to clean up all the areas with some acetone, and then I'll be ready to get these pieces into position onto the press, and then I'll tack them in place. And then if I'm happy with the way it's looking, then I'll complete the welds. Okay, I've got one of the plates in position. I'm holding it with these magnets, and I'm going to tack it in place. Okay, it's tacked in place. I'm going to complete the welds. So here's the welds on this one. It's not going to win any awards, but it's decent and it's going to hold. So I'm going to tack this one, and I'm going to weld this one in place too. And here's the other side. On this one, I started welding this way, and then I decided I liked going back better this way. And then this one, I just pretty much went all the way across. I stopped about there and then kept on going. Decent welds, and it's gonna hold just fine. And then one thing I didn't say is that on this side, I have the pulley sticking out further because of how far the winch sticks out right there. So I get a straighter pull to the pulley. But on this side, I have less of it hanging out because it's just gonna go over to the handle that I'm now gonna weld a ring onto. So this side didn't need to stick out as far as the other side. The last thing I have to do is clean up the metal on this handle, and I'm gonna weld this ring onto there. I have it marked where I wanna clean off the paint, and I'm gonna do that with a Milwaukee die grinder and a flap disc. Okay, I've got it where I want it on the handle, holding it in place with a couple magnets, and I'm gonna tack it. Now what I wanna do is I wanna bring the cable over the top and down and make sure the height at which I tacked it onto the handle is gonna allow me to get that carabiner in place. Okay, the carabiner hooks in just fine. I'm gonna complete the welds on that ring. I think I was welding a little too hot, or I wasn't moving fast enough. I could see where I ate into the ring, but that shouldn't be an issue. It should be okay. So I tried this thing out, and I learned it's not as optimal as I would have hoped it would be. I'm pretty sure because I now have the press bed imbalanced because I have the winch on one of the handles. It makes it heavy on this side. When I operate the winch, the press bed wants to really get cattywampus, and it doesn't go up or down evenly. I have to support it a little bit to allow it to track evenly, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So I'll raise it up a little bit, and you can immediately see the lighter side is coming up first. So I'll get it up a little more, and I'll put the pins down lower. I'll flip the switch, and now it'll go down. And you can see how it's tracking. It's way off balance. But if I just simply support it here, then I can go down pretty evenly. And then same on the way up. If I give it a little bit of support, then I could raise it evenly. The main reason that I think the press bed is able to get so out of whack is the amount of play to the left and to the right. And I did take some of that slack out by putting some 1/4 inch plexiglass on the insides of both of the I-beams. I cut it to the right width and I affixed it to the I-beam with some JB weld that's made for plastic applications. So I essentially took out a 1/2 inch of play and I still have this much movement in the press bed in between the I-beams. So I kind of think Harbor Freight made it that way for a reason, that a single person could lift up one side and be able to set a pin and then lift up the other side and set a pin. And that's how most people do it when they're on their own. They have to basically seesaw the press bed up to where they want it or down to where they want it to do the press work they need to do. So there it is there. It is what it is. It's not ideal, but you saw that I was able to stabilize the press bed just by giving a little bit of support on the same side the winch is connected to. So now what I want to do is do a practical demonstration of using the winch modification with doing some axle work. I think performing axle work is probably some of the most challenging things you'll do with your Harbor Freight 20-ton press because the axle is heavy and it's a little bit awkward to deal with. So I do have a spare 3rd gen 4Runner axle and one of my buddy Dwayne's axle tools hooked up to it, and I want to demonstrate a couple different positions you would be getting your axle onto the Harbor Freight 20-ton press to do the necessary press work. The first orientation I'm going to do is pretend that you're either pulling off the ABS tone ring and inner retainer, or you're pressing the axle shaft out of the bearing. So that's the one I'm going to demonstrate first. So I have one of Dwayne's older tools connected here, and I'm going to set it right on the 2-inch angle iron that I welded in for the other mod. And it was pretty much dumb luck that the angle iron was spaced in such a way where it will support the brake backing plate. The reason why that we put him in closer to the center was Sean had a good concern. If we put the angle iron further out towards the ends, then it might inhibit us getting close to the press bed because the angle iron would be basically hitting us in the shins. So we put it in a little more inboard to where we can get really close to the material and not be required to lean over because the angle iron was in the way. So it worked out pretty well. So now I'm going to lower the press bed down to the height of the special service axle tool and get the tool supported on the press bed. So I first have to lift up a little bit so I can pull the pins. And then I'm going to set the pins down as far as I can. And now I'll flip the switch and I'm going to bring the press bed down to the tool. Now that I have the special service tool up above the press bed, now I'm going to come in with my press plates. And then I'll flip the switch and I'll raise the assembly up. And then I'll set the pins. And now I'll lower the press bed onto the pins. And then it would be simply getting the material square with the pressing appendage. And then if I want to get the material closer, I can add some press plates underneath here, or I can pull down on this and screw the screw bar out a little bit, whatever I want. And then I start doing my press work. So this is one of the orientations. You'll be getting the axle onto the press to be able to pull off an ABS tone ring and inner retainer and to press the axle through the bearing. So that's one of two primary orientations. Now I'm gonna set it up to where you're ready to press on the new bearing, new outer retainer, and it's gonna be a little bit different. And this one might be a little bit challenging balance-wise, but let's see how it goes. I have a crash pad underneath to protect the axle when I slide it through. I have the tool resting on the crash pad. I have a sleeve that's going to be pressing the parts on. And now I'm going to lower the press bed down to the tool. So I'll raise the tool up and turn it 90 degrees, and now I'm going to come in with a couple press plates to support the tool. Now I'm going to come in with the axle. I'm going to pretend that I already pressed the axle through the bearing and the outer retainer, and I got the snap ring in place above the outer retainer. And now I want to press on the ABS tone ring and inner retainer to the proper depth on the axle. So I'm going to come in with the axle and drop it in. Now, this is where things might get a little interesting balance-wise. So let's see how it goes. So instead of using my free hand to balance the press bed, I'm holding onto the axle. Now that the press bed is supporting the axle, now I'll move my hand back to supporting the press bed and keep it balanced while I go up. And now I'll set the pins. And now I'll lower the assembly onto the pins. Then again, it would be a situation, get the whole assembly centered underneath the pressing appendage. I can build up the height with some more press plates, or I can pull down on this and screw the screw bar out some to take up a little bit of the space there. I can stack up a bunch of plates here in between the axle and the pressing appendage with things like this. So those are the two different orientations you'd be getting the axle onto the press to be able to remove the parts from the axle and to be able to press the parts back on. And I have to say that I'm pretty happy with how it's working out. Again, it's not ideal because the press bed isn't perfectly balanced and I have to help support it by using my free hand to give it a little bit of stability. But all in all, this is a big improvement from having to have a second person and have to perform a bunch of squats or basically back rows to manipulate the press bed to the position you need to do the required press work. So I'm pretty happy with how this winch is going to work out for me, and I'm going to give it 2 thumbs up. Whether or not you want to do it the same way I did, and maybe you want to put the winch on top like I've seen a lot of other guys do, that's going to be entirely up to you. I just didn't want to mess with having to cut and affix another cable to the winch to where 2 cables are going down to the opposing handles. I kind of like the fact that the winch is on one side and I didn't have to mess with altering the winch like other guys had to do. So this is another mod that you can do to your 20-ton press to take a little bit of the workload off your body, because I'll be the first to admit, I'm no spring chicken anymore. I'm 58 going on 59, and whatever things I can do to take the strain off my body, then it's a worthwhile project to do. And I have left some of these rear axle seal jobs with some back discomfort because I do have some back problems. And now I pretty much know doing any future axle work with my Harbor Freight 20-ton press, it's going to be a lot easier on my body, which is a good thing. So, with all that said, we thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Tool Man and Sean. We will, of course, be back with more videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Click on that subscribe button and also click on that notification bell if you'd like to be notified when we put up new content on our channel, which we are always putting up very helpful and cool and sick mods kind of content. So don't miss out. Peace out, happy wrenching, sick mods, and sick modifications to your Harbor Freight 20-ton press. Bye-bye.